Good afternoon, and welcome to day 2 of the Within Health Summit. My name is Jamie Singletary, and I am the Director of Clinical Brand Development, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce the CEO and co-founder of Within Health, Dr. Wendy Oliver-Pyatt. And in today's session, Dr. Pyatt is going to be talking to us about wellness versus weight stigma, getting what you want, need, and deserve in our healthcare system and communities. And before I turn it over to Dr. Pyatt, I just wanted to remind everyone here that we encourage you to utilize the chat feature to share your comments, concerns, questions, and anything that you might want our presenter to know. Also, at the conclusion of this presentation, you will receive a survey and a link to download your CE certificate. We are also excited to share that we are offering CMEs as well. So if we have any medical providers out there that need assistance with their certificates, I am going to drop my email in the chat so that you can contact me and that we can make sure that everyone gets what they need. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Wendy Oliver-Pyatt.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm so grateful for everybody being here today. Day 2, right? I lost a little track of time of our Within Health Summit. So grateful to the whole team that's been putting this together, to Kath Stevens, Jamie, Cynthia, Stephanie, that have made this possible. I adore you guys. I appreciate you guys. And I love the fact that we have a summit, because the point of the summit, one of the big points of the summit, is that we just don't want to only be preaching to the choir. We want to bring together different groups, whether it's somebody from the New York Times, whether it's somebody from Forbes, whether it's somebody from the NBA, from YouTube, like all these different like subcategories, of our communities and our world are coming together, because of course a lot of providers do now know a little bit about weight stigma, although I think we're still in the early stage of that really being spoken about. But it's not a lot of people in the NBA that know about what weight stigma really is, and it's just so pervasive, and it hits all domains of our life, and it's extremely toxic. If I would call it poisonous, because it infuses shame into the human being. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And shame is one of the subjects that I think is very, very important to talk about in our space and in general. I actually first developed a talk on the subject in 2012 with the Binge Eating Disorder Association. At that time, weight stigma was not really spoken about a whole lot in our space. So I am really happy that now I'm pleased that weight stigma has more presence in the eating disorder space. My hope is that weight stigma will be in the future will be completely not acceptable, that people will know what it is and will be, demand that, people who are perpetuating weight stigma will be called out. They'll learn about it. It's not that people necessarily are bad that are doing it. It's just I'm going to say gently, but with love, the ignorance around it will be lifted, and people will sort of demand that all people in all bodies are treated in a way that the very minimum is non-shaming. So again, I'm not sure who all the audience is when we're doing something like this, so I'm going to start from the very basics here. So weight stigma is really like weightism, weight bias, and it is weight-based discrimination. It is a type of discrimination, and that's a very important point. It's in that vein. There's a similarity there with racism. It is a form of discrimination. It's a judgment, and it's a stereotype based on somebody's weight, shape, and or size. So I think it's one of those types of discrimination, and this is the part that's really, really messed up. It's actually socially sanctioned discrimination, and it's socially reinforced discrimination. And healthcare providers and schools and government agencies also participate in this form of discrimination openly, and also sometimes even with pride, and also with even with a vein of superiority and knowledge. And in that case, in that sense, there's an element of weight stigmatization that's sort of a form of gaslighting, because the perpetrator is in an authority position as if they're helping, but in fact they're actually hurting. Weight stigma fuels behavior and actions by individuals and organizations that include bullying, hate speech, and exclusions. Exclusions from employment, healthcare, education, and even social acceptance. So weight stigma is a poison to our soul that damages the interpersonal connection between two parties or groups of people, that leaves one person hurt or injured. And usually that person may avoid future interactions as much as they can, and may also turn to other behaviors to get through the pain of weight stigma. It's worth saying and important to note that most of us have weight stigma in us in some way, shape, or form. Certainly individuals with eating disorders in all body sizes and shape are carrying around weight stigma as a piece of it. And full recovery is like that release of that self-imposed, it's societally induced and then self-imposed weight stigma. Recovery is about moving out of the paradigm of shame-based view of yourself and body to embracing ourselves as we are. And in that case, recovery from all eating disorders is about that. But it is worth saying that those that live in a larger size body experiencing not just that internalized shame, but they're actually experiencing overt and covert oppression as well. So there's an added layer, of course, it's actually not even an added layer. It's a whole different ball game when you're actually experiencing oppression versus just internalized weight stigma. So I think that's a really important kind of thing to bear in mind, is that some of us want to advocate around weight stigma. I certainly do, but I don't experience the oppression. And so we have to just keep that in mind. So there's this prejudice and discrimination, and that stigmatized person develops a devalued social identity. This is the internalizations of attitudes toward body size that really affect how the target is treated. And then the way we're treated becomes internalized. Again, it is a form of discrimination. Weight discrimination occurs more frequently than gender or age discrimination. It has increased a lot in the past decade. Peer victimization is predicted by weight. Individuals who are sometimes labeled the O word are victimized by their peers at 2 to 3 times more likely, and are 2 to 3 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts and behaviors than those who are not victimized by their peers. And I think this is a very, very important point. It's the stigmatizing experience that's causing the suicidality and the poor quality of it. It's not the weight, it's the stigmatizing experience perpetrated by the other person or persons that's causing the adversive psychological outcomes. So as we've progressed in the field, we've had in the past 20 years, we're, more talking about trauma that so coexists with eating disorders. And what is very important for individuals to understand is that weight stigma is actually a form of experiencing weight stigma is a trauma. So this internalization of this negative view of self is a form of trauma. And it actually interferes also with healthcare seeking behaviors because of the avoidance. We'll talk more about that when we get to a slide that we have that kind of shows how stigma in the healthcare setting leads to avoidance of healthcare. So how does it actually happen? How does it create this trauma? Well, it creates it because our identity is affected by the way that we are treated. And we internalize this way of seeing ourselves based on how we're treated. And that identity development involves three actual dimensions. We internalize what other people say. We internalize when we hear these words do hurt by what people say to us. So when that little girl is told, you're just a fat version of your sister, right? And some of these things or that patient is told by her doctor, you're fat every day, so you should exercise every day. These kind of ways that scars, that hurts, that's pain, that's trauma. And then there's another way in which we're actually treated. So if we're shunned, we're ignored, we're not chosen, this is also a way we internalize the shame. And then also in images also can lead to the internalization of shame. So when we see these images, can be conscious or unconscious, it leads to the internalization of shame, which results in trauma. So, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'm going to probably say that more than once, right? Experiencing weight stigma actually increases the likelihood of engaging in unhealthy eating behaviors, lower levels of physical activity. Stigmatization actually leads people to avoidance, loneliness, isolation, despair, and in some cases, coping with food, which is the irony of it, and other coping mechanisms. So people who internalize these weight-based stereotypes are more likely to then turn to food and other coping mechanisms. So I was talking with a couple of doctors. I was at the Florida Psychiatric Association meeting. And these are doctors that are not eating in the eating disorder space. They're not terrible human beings. They just don't get it. And they use the O word and they're like, but what do you mean? And we have to talk to our patients about this. And we have to tell them, we have to tell them to eat less and exercise more because we're good doctors. And that's what we have to do because our patients need this information from us, right? So I'm sitting there like at this restaurant, at this dinner, I'm just like, I'm like, calm, stay calm, Wendy, be calm, and I start to try this. So this is what I tried to do to connect the dot. So I started off by talking about shame in general, leaving out, weight or anything like that. Just what do we think about, situations that cause shame? What do we think about that? So we got to talking about that. We also then all agreed that really good patient care, health care delivery by a doctor with a patient really does involve developing a collaborative relationship, a good working, partnership. So we were like, yeah, that matters a whole lot. The relationship matters a whole lot. So then we were able to connect those dots. So if the person who's quote unquote helping is inducing shame, into the relationship, what do we think is actually happening, in the relationship and with, and with the person. So that was sort of how we were able to connect the dot that these experiences of really being judged for our bodies, which is a very deeply personal, soul piercing experience, that our very body, our very being, our one gift from God that's ours and ours alone is defective, not acceptable, not lovable. Being told that by, an authoritative institution such as a doctor is a real sense, does lead to despair. And of course, avoidance of healthcare in general, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So if you have any questions or any comments about anything that I'm talking about, if this making sense, if it's not making sense, if you agree, if you don't agree, I would love, to put it in the chat, because at the end, we're going to try to have some time for Q&A. So I just wanted to mention that. So there was a study done that looked at all the different categories of shame, different ways that people experience shame, like where it came from. And these are really the areas that people talked about what they felt shame around. So these are the general categories of how shame was actually experienced. And within all those categories, body image was the one that was the closest to the universal category. So over 90% of participants experienced body shame. For the chat, tell me how many of you in our group today has experienced in your life body shame? If you have experienced body shame, and you're willing to share that with us, put your hand out or let us know. Let me know if you've experienced body shame. I'm just interested in knowing if that is something universal to this group or just some, some like random, these findings are not really consistent with this group. And it's true. And I think we tend to think that the only people that experience body shame are the people that do have eating disorders, that are very, they just, that's who we think has body shame. But our society is so negative around our natural body size and shape that body shame is somewhat, ubiquitous. And that is why, side note, when you're trying to do education with families, you can't always like tell them like every single thing to do in every single situation. But the areas that I try to always make sure families understand is that your loved one with an eating disorder has this internalized shame, and they have body shame, and they have shame around eating. And I make sure they know what weight stigma is, because they need to know weight stigma out there in the community affecting their loved one, and even their own potential stigma that they may be perpetuating into their loved one who's recovering. So if you're working with families and you want to help them, be able to, yes, height, shoe size, anything, body shame in general, Jenny. If you want to help families help their loved ones, body, like teaching around body shame and weight stigma, if we can teach around that, the families will be like much more able. And the problem is that so many things that cause shame are, again, socially sanctioned. So the family won't know that, oh, that is actually a shaming experience. Because, after all, at school, your kids have to do the presidential fitness challenge to see if they can climb up the rope, or how many sit-ups they can do, or how fast they can run a mile, because there's this one size fit all for what our bodies are supposed to be able to do. And, I could never climb a rope. I don't care how much, I don't care how much Pilates I do. I'm never climbing a rope. I'm never climbing a rope. When I was a kid, I felt really kind of embarrassed that everybody stood in line and we had to like climb the rope. I never climbed the rope. So the other thing to think about is what's shaming for me might not be shaming for another person too, right? So you have to always think about the event or the situation. So, as a 58-year-old woman, and if I'm at the gym and I try to climb a rope and I'm like following my, what, I'm going to probably laugh about it, right? It's not going to really bother me a whole lot. But when I'm a, 12-year-old girl, entering puberty, and I'm in a peer group, that's going to be more of a problem for me. That is why, the measures that the schools have been doing for prevention and weighing kids in schools and that sort of thing, it's just insane, right? I'm probably preaching to the choir here. It's insane, that nobody really thinks about like, what's the impact of this on the psychology of these kids? But it's like, no, we don't think about that. We just need to know what their BMI is, right? So, and like I tell people sometimes, that are working with kids with eating disorders, not everybody, I give this example. My brother, Glenn, he travels a lot. He goes in and out of drive-throughs a lot. His cholesterol's gone up. Da, da, da. I mean, a dietitian could probably tell him, hey, Glenn, chill out on like the hamburgers, let's get you eating some more, salads or something, right? My brother would not be, he wouldn't experience shame. He would probably be like, okay, fine. And then, he wouldn't really listen probably. But other people with greater vulnerability may in fact feel it as a shaming experience. So it really depends on, who it is, developmentally where they are, who's watching. So always keeping aware, being aware of that context is important. So the shame, right? What actually is it? The most common view of shame, according to Heidi Mayboom, who wrote The Descent of Shame. I'm giving a talk on shame on Friday, by the way, because I love the subject. The most common view, I don't love shame, but I love the subject. The most common view of shame is that it's an intensely negative emotion directed at the self as a result of having failed to live up to some standard, ideal, or norm. So if we live in a society that has a standard, ideal, or norm that makes it so that our natural body size or shape is not acceptable, or we feel that way because of the number of images that we see, because of the number of times we're told that, blatantly, overtly, covertly, then we're going to have this pernicious shame embedded into our soul. And shame is really at the heart of many forms of self-destructive behavior: addiction, suicidality, self-injury, eating disorders, disordered eating. Shame is at the root of, that's why shame is it's so important, because it affects so many things that are like social calamities. And we might talk about the eating disorder, we might talk about the addiction, but we're not talking a whole lot about what's underneath it, and how is our society creating this situation that we're in. Einstein said, in order to address a problem, you have to go below you can't just, I call it symptom chasing. When I use this sometimes I'm like, you guys are symptom chasing, it's like, she did this, we do that, blah, 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 blah. That's what dieting is. Oh my God, you've gained weight, eat less, exercise more. It's like this nonsensical, like merry-go-round of chasing, behavior. And what we really have is a society that has set these standards, ideals, or norm that are not natural for us. Now, let's take into consideration certain vulnerable groups that might be developmentally vulnerable, that might have even more stronger ideals or norms imposed upon them, or they might be people who have certain traits that leave them more vulnerable to shame. One of the things I like to talk about is that trait of perfectionism. We see a lot of perfectionism in folks that develop eating disorders, and perfectionism is a trait that is has genetic origins. So some people just come out and they are going to be more perfectionistic. If we are innately more perfectionistic, then we're going to probably feel even more of more importance to meet that standard, ideal, or norm. And so we really hold on to those standard ideals or norms because of that perfectionism, which means that folks that have more perfectionism in their traits are more vulnerable to the experience of shame. If you talk to somebody about their eating disorder and you talk to them about why aren't you eating? What's going on here? I remember, I'm not going to name names, but a very famous doctor in our field tried to tell me that people with anorexia nervosa, they just don't like food. They just don't get pleasure or enjoyment out of eating. I'm like, well, let's see. That's where lived experience comes in really, really, really handy, right? It could be clinical experience or lived experience. It doesn't always have to be double-blind, placebo control, evidence-based treatment. Evidence is also lived experience. When you really get into the heart, mind, and soul of somebody who's restricting, in my opinion, there's some common themes. And those themes are very much shame-based, which is tied in with weight stigma. And that the person is not eating a lot of times because they will feel intense shame after they're done eating. They will have what I call a shame spiral. And so it's not that they don't, like, they may want the food, but they don't want the shame spiral, because that is way too much to spare. And this is all connected to weight stigma. So who actually inflicts the weight stigma? Family is the number one culprit for that. How many people agree that they've seen that in their lived experience, that the family is the main culprit of weight stigma? If you agree with that, I'd love for you to put that in the chat so I can look at that and see what you all think. See, since we're not in the same room, this is my way of getting a little dialogue going. So otherwise, when you give a talk like this, you're literally talking, and I'm sitting here blabbing and blabbing and blabbing, right? And I'm in my office, I'm blabbing and blabbing and blabbing. And I literally don't see anybody. I just see my screen. And it's like, is there really people there? Am I just talking? Are people like, so yay. Thank you for your chat comments. So I'm like, okay, I'm in a room. There are people here. That's good to know. So yeah, so a lot of people are saying very much so. Okay, and then Jenny, pediatricians. So the next is doctors. The next is doctors. We doctors are second to family members as far as the perpetrators of shame. Classmates, well, that doesn't surprise me. I had a dear friend, a young male in his 30s. I'm looking at sales clerk now. A young male in his 30s, Miami for you. He was buying a suit to go to his best friend's wedding. And he went to the place to buy a suit, and he put on the suit. And it was like a couple weeks before the wedding. The sales clerk literally told him to go out, to come back in a couple weeks, and basically advised him to like diet and exercise. And then he could come back and like try on the suit, and then maybe the suit would be okay. Now, this person knows a lot about our field, so thankfully he could process it with me. That's a very degrading thing to say to somebody. So then we have, on top of weight stigma, we have orthorexia woven into our culture. So orthorexia is this, again, thing that people tend to feel shame about, that you have to do this clean eating, and you have to, make sure your food, is certain types of food, certain colors of food. And, the person with anorexia, wow, they can debate any fact about food. I mean, I can never keep up with the facts about food that any of my beloved patients with orthorexia give me. I could never keep up. They're going to know, boom, 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 grams, this, that, everything, nutrients, micronutrients. They're going to kick my butt with their knowledge, right? And that's really like seen as a great thing, right? So orthorexia is woven to our culture. That's really also tied in with weight stigma, because we're supposed to eat this pure way. And basically what happens is you've got a real recipe for disaster. Many of us providers know this. You have weight stigma, and then you kind of have, I never really said this before. It's like food stigma, right? It's like, how dare you eat this, or I'm better than you because I'm eating that, and yada, yada, yada. And so that really causes a disruption, in the relationship with food, because we cannot really just be mindful with food, and we can't be just thinking about, what am I hungry for? I'm feeling the hunger cues come on, like, wow, I feel like, gosh, I really want to have a burrito, but then it's like, oh, no, burrito, Wendy. Salad, no burrito, right? So now I'm in a conflict, right? I have an internal conflict, burrito, salad. Now, how mindful can I be? Well, guess what? Eventually I eat the burrito, because biology wins, the drive wins, but I feel guilty. I feel shame. Now what's happening when I'm feeling shame? now there's a connection between shame and dissociation, because I have to dissociate from the shame in order to eat the food. So that's how dissociation and eating, quote unquote, bad food gets linked together. And it's very addictive. The power of dissociation is very addictive. A binge eater isn't so much hungry for the binge of the food. They're actually hungry for the dissociation that comes along. The food is, like in a Pavlovian way, a link to dissociation. And that's because of the good food, bad food paradigm. You have to cross that barrier, that internal barrier, to eat that food because you feel shame about it, because there's food stigma and weight stigma that we're holding on to. That's interrupting our mind-body connection. It's interrupting our capacity to be mindful. So again, here is, when you talk about weight stigma, you got to say this a few times: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. By the way, there's a slide in here. Before I show it, I'm going to let you know that is kind of disturbing. So I'll tell you before I show it. It's actually an image that the U.S. government put on billboards, and it's just to really demonstrate that social institutions like screw up. Cigarette smoking is a really good example. Like when my dad got out of war, when he was released, he got packages from the U.S. government, including cigarettes. Luckily, he didn't use them. He traded them for English lessons from this other guy. But, authoritative institutions screw up. So I'm gonna talk more about that when we get to the slide. But this is also, something for physicians to keep in mind. So basically, what happens is that people experience biases in healthcare. They get treated a certain way. They go to the doctor because they have, a tear in their rotator cuff, right? And they come out of the, appointment for the tear in the rotator cuff with a diet. Like, somebody was literally just telling me this happened. I was like, oh my gosh. So this leads to painful feelings. This leads to avoidance of healthcare. And this actually causes like major health consequences. People don't get their screening exams because they're trying to avoid these health consequences. It can later lead to increased medical visits because now they have breast cancer, or now they have a really bad torn rotator cuff, or now they have an eating disorder for that matter. So a big, gigantic problem we have in our society also is the problem with BMI, right? So we have this obsession, with BMI as an indice of health. Just curious on this. Yes, Julia, schools and teachers are not educated. I'm curious, just because this is the summit and we're trying to bring different bodies of people together, not just like eating disorder people, even though I love all my eating disorder people. But how many people in this room have never heard this idea that BMI, if you've never heard that BMI is bullshit, let's just say, can you send me a chat if you think that, if you've been told and you believe that BMI is a reliable standard for health? Can you tell me that? Has anybody in this room, I'm just curious who's in the room. Has anybody ever not heard about the problem with BMI? Okay. So I love you guys. I am kind of with my people, it sounds like. So hi, you guys. Hi, eating disorder people. We know that BMI measures, a person's weight, which is fat, muscle, water, tissues. It's not just fat. And even if it was, adipose is an organ system. We need fat on our bodies in order to sustain our brain, our body, our health, our life. Different people have different amounts of fat that are normative for them. In fact, I was just really enjoying the talk that Sean and Mary gave earlier about establishing weight ranges for full recovery. So, one person's recovered weight is going to be different than another. I mean, if I tried to be the BMI that's like supposedly what I'm supposed to be, like supposedly, I would be restricting, and I wouldn't be able to go have a normal lunch, after I didn't make my lunch before time. After this, I wouldn't be able to go have a normal lunch if I was I'm trying to weight suppress. Even a little bit of weight suppression causes a lot of misery, because you can't just have a peaceful relationship with food. You can't be mindful because you're in a conflict with your need to eat. As long as you remain in a conflict with your need to eat, then you're not going to be able to be mindful, and you're not going to be able to have full recovery. So full recovery from eating disorder is possible when correct treatment is provided. And part of the correct treatment is getting on that path to mindfulness. And getting onto that path to mindfulness means that you're not challenging your body's physiological need to eat. You're not challenging your intuitive sense of what you're hungry for. Because if you eat a salad when you want a burrito, you're not, going to be in a peaceful relationship with food. You're going to be in conflict. We already talked about this. Not all children, not all adults fit into these categories. Another thing that I've included in this talk is just really this anti-fat attitude questionnaire to give everybody a sense of an opportunity to see what their own internal biases may be. This is something that I think is painful, and I certainly feel that it's hard to even look at this slide for me, honestly. It makes me feel very uncomfortable, but it's something that's real for people living in larger bodies. And when we all need to take a look, I think, at our own internal biases and anti-fat attitudes, we've been inundated with these ideas. So it's in a sensitive way and in a careful way, and with the people that are we definitely don't want to hurt anybody when we're processing our BS, if you will. Because we just, at the end of the day, we want to first do no harm, but examining ourselves is a big piece of this, in my opinion. I don't think we could give this talk today about weight stigma without talking about the American Academy of Pediatrics new childhood guidelines. This came out last year. Oh no, this year. What am I saying? This year, right? Everybody in this group know about these guidelines from the Academy for Pediatrics. This really shows you, what I was saying about authoritative social institutions. So, first of all, they use the O word, which why do we not use the O word, guys? I mean, I've had to look back on myself and cringe, because we used to use it in our space, in our field, even at beta talks. We had the O word in there, because the reason the O word is a problem is because it inherently labels something as pathological based on just size alone. And it's not reality, and it's discriminatory, and it's judgmental, and it's scientifically unfounded. So that's why we don't use the O word anymore. I think it's pathologizing. And anytime, we're pathologizing somebody, that's not good. So, even this whole idea, intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle treatment, what the heck is that? What is that? What are they going to do? Go tell kids to count? What are they going to give kids those watches? They can count how many steps they take. What are we doing here, guys? How about we let the kids play outside? How about we have some parks? How about we have some breaks? How about we not inundate kids with homework every day? How about we have schools that kids don't have to start, at 7 a.m., which is not in line with what their body needs? How about we not overschedule kids? How about we give our kids nutritious meals and snacks throughout the day? How about we eat together? How about we teach our kids, flexible eating? How about we teach our kids self-compassion, compassion for others? No, we're doing intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle management treatment apparently instead of that. And then, of course, if you're 12 or over, go ahead and, give some Wegovy to these youngsters, and basically in so doing, tell them that they're defective. Oh, and by the way, let's don't really think about the higher incidence of pancreatitis, bowel obstruction, and gastroparesis that just came out, that I just put on my LinkedIn last week. 4 times higher rates of bowel obstruction, 3.5 times a higher rate of gastroparesis, and I think it was a 9 times higher rate of pancreatitis for people using GLP-1s. And then, of course, if you're 13 or over with the BMI of over 120%, which, by the way, a lot of my family members who are biracial have a BMI of over 120%, and they're perfectly healthy, should be evaluated for metabolic surgery. So this is what the Academy for Pediatrics is saying these days. I think the next slide is the one I was telling you that is potentially triggering. No, it's not. Sorry. This is just about the BMI. It's bogus. It was developed by a mathematician in the 1800s. It doesn't measure. It doesn't even, first of all, body fat's not bad. Body fat is okay. Sometimes I like to show my patients my body fat. I'm like, here it is. It's like exposure therapy. But it doesn't even measure body fat, alone. It doesn't account for sex, ethnicity, muscle mass, or age. It is nonsense, utter, complete nonsense. And so obviously schools have gotten really in on this, not just the BMI screening, but the banning of junk food, quote unquote junk food. I was actually talking with some of my folks, some of my wonderful people that I work with, about the Michelle Obama, God bless her, the Just Move or Let's Move campaign or whatever. And part of that was changing the food that was given at the schools for the healthy food. My dear Monica told me that her kids were in school during this time. This was way after my kids were. And her kids that, Monica gave her kids, they literally made money selling the food, the quote unquote junk food at the school. There was literally like a black market, if you will, for the foods that, wasn't permitted to be in the school or, given during lunch and that sort of thing, which is really interesting. Actually, there's some interesting work looking at like how the French folks feed their kids at school. And it's really interesting because they send the menus home to the families, and the family, it's like a 4-week schedule, and like they eat, on placemats, and they use like very nice dinnerware. And it's very much emphasized about like the children, like having this it's mindful, but it's like this true enjoyment and of food, and this respect and this honoring of food. And it's certainly not like, it's not food discrimination. Let's just put it that way. Weight stigma and treatment. Oh my gosh. This is such a big problem, you guys. What time is it? 2:43. Weight stigma and treatment. This is such a problem. People that have binge eating disorder, guys, have a lot of internalized weight stigma. All people do, but if you're living in a larger body, it's even worse. And we have to be mindful of the fact that our environments have to be inclusive of all sides and make it comfortable for all folks in our care to be able to sit comfortably, to be able to move comfortably. And then beyond that, and maybe not even more importantly, but in addition, I should say, we cannot prescribe weight loss diets to folks living in larger bodies. And I see this a lot. I still see it to this day. I see people coming into my care at times that have been at higher levels of care, or I've seen it when they've transferred, where they were actually on a restrictive caloric meal plan because of living in a larger body. which of course results in, not recovering. And most folks with binge eating disorder, if you really dig in, you'll see that they are actually quite restrictive in their eating because they feel a lot of shame and they are shamed for eating. So you can ask folks that binge, like, what's the last thing you ate before you binge? I like to ask, and it's usually, it's not the full-bodied snack, at 4 o'clock. It's the celery or the carrots that led to the binge. So there's a lot of weight stigma that's happening in treatment. There's a lot of stigma toward providers that are living in larger bodies as well. There's assumptions that people in larger bodies have an eating disorder or binge, which is also not true. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area. I am about to show that slide that if you don't want to see it, it's just to talk about authoritative social institutions really screwing things up. So if you don't want to see this slide that I think is disturbing, just hold off for a moment. I'm going to show it now. This is a slide that the Ad Council put together, and it's called Take a Small Step to Get Healthier. Our government paid for this. So on the body that they're showing, they have these lines written across there that shows the body getting smaller and smaller. Started going out for walks during lunch hour, stops ordering takeout, starts cooking healthy meals, and then, drum roll, just bought a bikini that challenges obscenity laws. That's the Ad Council for you. Take a small step to get healthier. The end goal is to buy a bikini that challenges obscenity laws. Great. Love it. We talked a little bit about myths and stereotypes. We were talking about that self-evaluation of stereotypes. But one of the big ones is that the person in larger bodies have more medical problems, or that there's a lack of discipline or willpower. A lot of people, I live with people in the larger bodies, and I eat more than them, guys. So that idea that people living in larger bodies are eating more, that's just wrong. That's why health at every size is so refreshing. And it's a part of any talk on weight stigma, I think should talk a little bit about this. Now, because of weight stigma, our field used to treat those of us who believed in these principles like we were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. How dare we say anything about health at every size, and aren't we just condoning just people being in larger bodies and being gluttonous and not doing any self-care? And how dare we do this? We were really treated poorly in the field for our opinions about this being, a very beautiful foundation. But now many people do thankfully embrace it, and that makes me happy. So basically, health at every size really is about health and enhancement. It's about weight inclusivity, recognizing, again, inclusivity means, hey, you have a seat at the table. You belong here. You matter, and you're lovable and acceptable. It is about health enhancement, eating for well-being, being respected, treating people with respect, knowing what it means to not impose stigma, knowing what it means to treat another human being with respect. And then life-enhancing movement, that you can do whatever kind of movement you want. You could do gardening, you could do belly dancing. I mean, that whole idea that the only kind of movement that helps anybody is 5 hours of, aerobic 5 times a week. It's not true. I've treated people in residential programs for 20 years. And what changes people's physiological markers, such as cholesterol, blood pressure, hemoglobin A1C, it's actually not whether they lost weight or not, guys. It's whether or not they engaged in movement. And somebody's weight could be the same and somebody else's weight could go down. And the person whose weight stayed the same actually oftentimes will have better improvements. The other one, that the weight went down. So just this is a misinformation campaign that it's the weight loss that's causing, the improvement in the hemoglobin A1C. It's movement more than anything. It's moving our bodies is really, really helpful. But if we teach people that the only good movement is this aggressive 5 hours cardio type of thing, then people who don't feel comfortable with that, or that's like foreign to them, they're just going to give up and say, why even try? Because I can't do that. This is where it's important to understand the psychology of movement, understand what people have been told about movement, understand your identity as like, am I athletic? Am I not athletic? Because this black or white thinking about, oh, it's this kind of movement that's going to help you get better. And it's if you lose weight, and it's if your heart rate's this, and it's if you did it for this many hours, that's what really makes you get better and more healthy. That is not the case. Also, excessive movement and caloric restriction also is a huge stressor to your body. Dieting is actually associated with increased cortisol, also over exercise. These are things that also put your body into, oh, I better save calories now because like I'm freaking starving right now. So there's a lot of catch-22, in that. Restriction also can deplete tryptophan levels. Tryptophan levels are associated with like lower tryptophan levels can be associated with difficulties with impulse control. So there's a lot of different things that we think that just aren't true. So health at every size encourages accepting and respecting natural diversity of body size and shapes, eating in a flexible manner that values pleasure and honors internal cues of hunger, satiety, and appetite, finding joy in moving one's body and becoming more physically vital. So there has been a fat acceptance movement that's been around for a while, but we still have a very, very long way to go. I am uplifted by some of what I've seen in our society, where I do think people are getting that attitude of, hey, this is not acceptable anymore. And I'm really happy, to see that. And it's important because we do need to set up treatment and set up a culture that allows us to have mindful eating and cohesive eating. And so we do have to address the shame, the anxiety, and dissociation. That's all tied into weight stigma. Fat acceptance is about also being able to like live mindfully in a state of self-care. And so we have to reduce the shame and the anxiety because that causes dissociation. So this is just an exposure curve. So people that are living in larger bodies and people that have body shame and internalized weight stigma have to get used to their bodies and larger bodies when they have to go through changes in their weight and also of eating food. And all of that really is about also reducing shame, because the more we reduce shame through exposure to our natural body size and shape, through exposure to the food that's actually satiating, doing those repeated exposures actually leads to a cohesive, mindful experience. So weight inclusive means, really thinking about health in a way that where all people, fit in, all people can take up the space that they need to take. And it starts with first do no harm. And it's being holistic, thinking about the quality of life, and being individualized and creative, creating access. When you go to a doctor, you have to prepare for your appointment. I'm going to stop in 2 minutes so we can have 5 minutes of Q&A. But I do want to say this is important for people who do need healthcare. You do have to be able to get healthcare. I think you deserve to receive healthcare in a way that's not painful and not harmful. And so this sucks that you have to prepare for your appointment because I'm sorry that you have to go through this hell. It's wrong. At the same time, I want people to be able to be protected before they go to the doctor. And you might need to go with somebody. You might need a buddy. You might need a lot of things because you've got to be able to get your health care in a way that you deserve. So it is important. I like to let people know ahead of time. I like to suggest that people let their doctors know ahead of time that, hey, I'm not here to focus on weight. I don't want to talk about it. Stop it. And you can give handouts and stuff like that. One of my friends was telling me, actually it was Shavis, that she's literally walked out of the appointment. The guy just couldn't not talk about weight. But you can tell the person, I am not here to talk about weight. Oh, really? Like I'm living in a larger body. I'm very glad you let me know that. I think it's important to think of a physician. If that's your healthcare partner, you deserve to have a healthcare partner. You deserve to have a voice. You deserve to have a collaborative relationship. And just like any partnership, you have rights and reasons to choose your partner. If that person can't be your partner, then they can't be your healthcare provider. If that person talks down to you and treats you like they know more and are better than you, or or if they try to put you on a diet, right? If they try to put you on a diet, you don't deserve that. Any medical intervention requires a risk-benefit analysis. A diet is a medical intervention. And the risk-benefit analysis says that 5% of people who diet actually lose weight over time anyway, as if that's even the coveted outcome. More likely, it's going to lead to weight cycling, which leads to weight gain over time, disordered eating, and eating disorders. So you're allowed to have that collaborative partner. You're allowed to insist on it, and you're allowed to move on. How you implement it into healthcare. If you're the doctor, you got to know what weight stigma is. Your office has to know what it is. Your staff needs to know what to do when it comes to weighing. You have to have the right equipment to weigh, the right gowns to weigh people in, if you even need to get their weight, and people need to grant permission. It's not just an automatic thing. Doctors need to say, hey, I'd like to get your weight, and this is the reason why. And then you have the right to say, maybe not. So doctors need to recognize themselves, the steps that they need to take. Again, I talked about this, that dieting is a medical intervention. You have to do a risk-benefit analysis. And if you're a doctor, if you have a patient that's brave enough to speak up, say thank you. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for making me a doctor. Don't make assumptions about somebody because of their size. And also, doctors need to know about weight cycling. Doctors will talk all the time about the O word, but how many of them even talk about weight cycling? So I think I'm going to leave it at that so we can kind of wrap up. This is something I like to end with. Any kind of art, Eric Fromm says, requires concentration, knowledge, respect, and discipline. So I said, let's turn that into a way of living. So concentration means knowing ourselves, being aware. It's kind of like mindfulness. The more we know ourselves, the more aware we are, the more mindful we are, the more knowledge we have. The more knowledge we have, the more we're going to respect ourselves. We're going to understand the things we do, why we do this, why we do that, has a basis. We're going to start to respect ourselves. And then the more we respect ourselves, the more care we can give to ourselves. Now, he used the word discipline, but he wasn't talking Western definition. He was talking Eastern. So the more we respect ourselves, the more we can care for ourselves. And that leads to more concentration. So we want to be on that cycle, not of mindlessness, ignorance, contempt, and chaos. And that's the cycle of where we get in with weight stigma and diet culture. We want to be on this cycle: concentration leading to knowledge, to leading to respect, and leading to discipline. Back to concentration. But again, that discipline is the Eastern definition. I do it because I would miss it if I didn't. So that ends the talk. It's 2:58, so we only have 2 minutes, but I can definitely take any questions or comments through email via wendy@withinhealth.com or anything else people want to comment on or questions.
We did have a comment. They wanted to know, what year was that ad put out by the government, Wendy? Do you know?
I don't remember. I put it on one of my talks like 10 years ago. So it's been around for a while. That was a while ago. But I would say there's versions of that still available, but I can find out. Oh, I will find out, Deanna.
You're getting a lot of love in the chat. People are saying great information, powerful presentation. We did have one comment that I wanted to read. It said, thank you, very educational and great to take back to our clients. What I think is a struggle in working with the eating disorder population is when the clients judge staff bodies and helping our staff to tolerate, understand, educate, and self-care.
Wow. And that's like the elephant in the room that we have to tackle too, right? So that the wonderful providers that are living, in larger bodies can still do the beautiful work that they are here to do. So we have to manage that as well as organizations, because we do want to protect each other, as well, right? And our patients and each other as best we can. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you very much for being here. Stephanie Diamond thank you for being here. Kelly Roth, thank you for being here, being a new part of Within. Elizabeth, I love you. Julie, I see so many names of people that I've known. Kaylin, oh my gosh, Jenny, thank you guys so much. Jacqueline, Jamie, Jacqueline out in Oregon, love you. Bye, you guys.